Welcome to Able Pathways podcast. I'm Annabelle Ferber, founder of Able Pathways, where we provide executive function coaching for neurodiverse individuals and professional development for educators. Our podcast explores the windy journeys of learning and growth. Each episode, we travel the unique pathways taken by a diverse range of interesting people as they reflect on pivotal moments in their lives that led to unexpected insights and transformation. Through these conversations, we hope to illuminate the infinite pathways for how we grow and learn. Visit our show notes for links, information about our speakers, and resources mentioned on this episode. I might admit on the podcast that I've known you since freshman year of high school.
Long time.
What do we want to refer to you as? Principal, founder? What do you do?
Yeah. Okay. What? How about revolutionary social educational entrepreneur?
No. Principal and founder?
No, not principal. I hate that word. I mean, technically, I am currently the chief learning officer.
There's only a right answer that you can give me.
Okay, I did tell you my answer, my ideal answer.
Speaker for the dead. Blah, 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 blah.
Exactly. Oh, God, I love those in jokes. Oh. If you know what that is, I like you, you know? Yeah, so yeah, chief learning officer and kind of like a lover of learning. How about lover of learning?
I cannot make those words come out. You know what? I'm going to have you introduce yourself.
Wow. So what I tell the students at my school is my name is Peter Pintso Wongdi Azubah Lauenstein Denjongpa de la Rosa de la Mancha. Yeah. And I mean, just, sometimes the rhythm, you just needed de la Rosa de la Mancha.
Who in your family does that come from?
Yeah, I mean, it comes from Gabriel Garcia Marquez.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Can I call you Pintso for short?
Yes, you may.
Great.
All right. My name is Peter Pintso Wongdi Azubah Lauenstein Denjongpa. And I am calling in from deep within the Himalayan foothills, which are themselves, in a sense, mountains, but not compared to like the big ones nearby. Everyone listening will know what the top 3 tallest mountains in the world are.
Surely.
Yeah.
So what number are you?
Number 3.
Number 3.
Just made it. And it's an important mountain to know, and it's a hard mountain to say, but is beautiful, and it's especially beautiful right now. It's December and the mountain is out, and it's stunning. And so on my way to school every day, I see it, and obviously, in these hills, the roads are winding, and one can understand why this mountain was, and many mountains, Himalayans, cultures kind of revere their mountains as like living things, because as you approach the mountain, it does, on these winding roads, it does shift. It feels like it shifts. It feels like it moves, right? Sometimes it gets bigger, sometimes it gets smaller, and it gives the impression of movement, which is like, something to do with life. Anyway, so this is where I'm from. I'm living in the house that my grandmother built, because my grandfather was a lama, as they say, and I think he was not gonna build the house that my grandmother needed. So that lady, she just built it, and that was like back in the day, Yeah, I mean, I'm into the world known as, I guess, education. Although more and more, I like thinking of it, I don't know, as creating learning experiences. And there's something about language that is so inevitably confining, and then becomes laden with baggage, just with other stuff. Which is why I kind of joke that I don't like. I mean, I have met heads of school and principals that I like, but in general, I don't know. There's something about what principals are supposed to be that like I just never wanted to be that.
And yet you are principal of a school, okay, of a lower and upper school, and you're founding a university, Khangchendzonga Buddhist University. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming to speak with me today. We took windy paths, both ended up in education somehow, and I just can't wait to ask you how you got to that path yourself. But before I get into that, what are you currently reading, watching, or listening to? What's got your attention?
I'm reading a book on educational research by Hendricks and Kirschner. Really enjoying the ideas of. I'm reading a kind of a management book called Managing Polarities, which I've just started. I'm 30 pages in, but was recommended to me by my brother, who got a recommendation from one of his mentors. And I'm really liking that because the basic premise of that book is the issues that we face, the framework of like, oh, we've got to fix the problem is itself problematic, versus you have to manage these polarities, these different spectrums of the problem. And it's not like necessarily that you're going to fix the problem. You're going to negotiate between these forces that are pulling the problem in either direction. And that was I like that. I really like that kind of, it's like, in a sense, hyper nuance, right? Like, and this idea that if we're just in the fix the problem mindset, it's as if many of these intractable problems can be fixed, versus no, they're going to vacillate between polarities, and that vacillation can potentially be managed. That's an exciting thing. And then watching what I've been watching. What I've been watching most recently is Flow. So Flow TV is the TV of, like, Google has this AI video generator called Flow. And so Flow TV is just like where it goes from like one 8-second prompt created um mini video to another, right? So you see all sorts of these interesting, weird, sometimes fairly normal, like 8-second clips, and you can see the prompt below it that created it.
Interesting. Okay, I will check that out. What brings you joy these days?
I don't know. I feel so old saying this, but I really like walking. Yeah, there's this walk above my house. It's one of those walks where I'm walking towards the mountain, and yeah, I think probably it's because I'm like in front of screens and computers, and I'm talking to people all day. So like, I love just walking for like, it ends up being like an hour. Yeah, sometimes I have my phone and I have to, but it's like, it's so nice and it's crisp and it's clean. And there's not many cars, and it's still a road. It's not like a jungle hike. It's still like I'm on a road. But yeah, that's what
Hmm.
I really enjoy that.
I want to get into asking you like the pathway you took to get where you are. When did your interest in teaching first begin? Can you think back to the early sparks?
Well, like all of us, our stories actually begin before we are born. So yeah, my story definitely begins before I was born, in the sense that there's lots of different origin stories, right? But like, one origin story is that the last queen of Sikkim, an American, was really into education. And she helped a bunch of kids get scholarships to really awesome colleges abroad in various kinds of programs. And my dad was one of those. Was one of those. Her efforts to help kids in Sikkim get educated, especially at like really intense places, is what got my dad over to Brown, where he met my mom. And so that's one kind of thread, of the education story. And then after my parents got married, they came back to Sikkim and they started a school in West Sikkim. And so, and that's right when I was born. So the first 2 years of my life, my parents were literally starting school. And I often think of that school as a kind of a sibling, because they were creating that, as in a sense they were creating me. So yeah, so that's, I think, that's like one origin. But then again, this idea of, provenance or even karma. Like I didn't know it, of course, at the time, because how could I be aware? Like I only was aware of these origin things much later, like in my teens when I became interested. And I think the other reason is like I mean, I didn't, I think, go to as many schools as you did, but I think the differential. I think about differential in the sense of, I went to a Montessori school, then I went to a public school, then I went to a Catholic school, then I went to like a liberal artsy high school, and they were such different contexts, so different, and I'm really grateful for those differences, because I think it made me. I feel like it's almost a kind of, that word interleaving. It's almost its own kind of like where you put almost similar things next to each other to discern their difference, you know. And I feel like that is part of the story also. So anyway, so I feel like that the jumping was part of what was setting the stage for me. I feel all of this, like looking back on it, was the fertile soil that would make learning experiences such a interesting world, because I have seen these so many different worlds within my life, and such differences between them, and yet such fundamental similarities also, like I was saying, with the I really, and again, I don't know how much of this is just in my mind, but like I really grew up feeling that so many of my teachers would protect me. They were really, I mean, almost parental, right? That they would really want what was best for me, and that was their focus in life, is to like help me on my journey. And I suppose a bunch of gratitude comes out of that. And
So that when did you decide that you were going to go leave the United States, go back to Sikkim, and pick up at this school that had emerged at your own birth?
so actually, that school was different. I had visited that school a bit, but it had kind of its own trajectory. So in college, I wrote a grant. I mean, I'd been coming back and forth to Sikkim in high school, and then in college, I'd written a grant proposal uh, to do something in Sikkim around education. And meanwhile, in Sikkim, I had met with a bunch of kind of elders who were working on various projects, and there was kind of a convening at one point where a bunch of people got together around a fire and kind of just discussed some possibilities. Yeah, and the grant proposal, although I did not get the grant, it it started me on this idea that one could. And so then the elders were really excited about the idea, and yeah, a group came together to make it happen. And it was a really, really amazing group of people in Sikkim, people in the United States. Looking back on it, it was, fortuitous and kind of crazy, but very much fueled by people who deeply cared for Sikkim and for the
Mhm.
kids here. I mean, in a way, at the time, it was like obvious to me because I had grown up, for example, my high school was started by parents who cared deeply for their kids and so started a school. So the idea that the origins of schools were rooted in a deep caring for humanity and children and children's education was normal, right? And so it was surprising also to kind of find out over time that there was a perception of commercialization in Indian private education also, which was part of my own learning trajectory. I mean, I just grew up so clearly that you should never make money, as in like schools should never be for profit, and that is so core to how I was, the world I was raised in. So the origins of this school of Taktse were so, I don't know, I would say like were so rooted in a deep love of this place and on a desire for kids in this place to have access to an education that helped them be strong and help them be themselves and help them find their voice and where they're from.
What communities have been most formative to the school culture and school design? I mean, these could be like the Sikkimese community itself, but are there specific communities there that have been supportive of this work and helped to shape it?
Yeah. So the word community and Sikkimese means different things over here. I would say that my teachers from my life have been a huge influence from the United States, have been a huge influence on the school, really right from its inception, both in terms of how they impacted me, but also they've come over and done various workshops, and they've helped cultivate the teachers here in this really amazing way. Because of course, a lot of the teachers here in Sikkim at Taktse have not experienced as children the kind of education that we're now trying to give to the kids. The teachers here are amazing and have really accepted a path of like personal and professional transformation, like wholeheartedly. That has been made possible, I think, in many ways, both because they have traveled abroad and seen with their own eyes how different learning experiences can be, but also that we've been connected to these educators in the United States from Massachusetts, from the North Shore of Massachusetts, who are themselves just incredibly kind and curious and super competent people who are just incredible teachers. So that has been an intense influence on the school. My mom, she's not a community, but I think my mom, again, as this like older female guide figure, has been super important to the school's ethos, and this idea of, which I think she really brought, which is like rigor and joy, rigor and joy. We want both, and we can have both. And inevitably, because we are rooted in Sikkim, the culture of the Himalayas is really a tapestry. I mean, Sikkim is a diverse place, but with that diversity, there are still kind of cultural commonalities, like pretty intense high value on humility and harmony. And those are major ideas that we talk about a lot, because we have to navigate how the values of humility and harmony express themselves in a school that's trying to do something different. So, for example, humility is often manifested as quiet, as not speaking, you know, um, and certainly not, acting like something you don't know. And yet, in the style of education that we are promoting, we want discourse, we want discussion, and discussion is not quiet. We want people to look at a text and form an opinion and share it, and definitely regardless of traditional hierarchies. So that idea of like discussion can sometimes rub up against the values of humility and harmony, because of course in a discussion you can very easily not agree with someone else when they interpret, for example, a text, and you might have a different interpretation, and that there's a potential for that discourse to be interpreted as non-harmony, right? So these are now I'm understanding these are polarities that are not meant to be fixed. They are what is, but managing them is a lot of how we are intentional about our cultural context and the kind of the project.
Mm-hmm. You had just been talking about like all these different communities that help to shape Taktse, which is I don't think we've spelled it out, a lower and upper school, right? That kids from all over the area can come to, and there's a boarding and a day part to it. It's not a typical school at all. And I'm curious what you think in terms of educational foundations. Like, what are the core pillars that you built as you created this school?
Great question. Core pillars. I think one of them was definitely joy of learning. Partly, I had some experience with. I'm part of, again, on one of the origins of the school was that I had cousins here that had such different educational experiences than I had had, and that was shocking to me. Meaning, I really they did not seem to like school at all. Meaning, of course, they love their friends, and even some of them, felt good about their teachers, but the actual learning experience was like so terrible. And it wasn't about connecting to ideas and characters and history and and experiments and natural laws. So I think one of the pillars was to have a school where learning was overwhelmingly positive, so where kids would want to come to school. And I think at the beginning it was just that, and then I think it has also evolved to, to more nuanced, like we want kids to come to school, not just because, it's fun alone, you know what I mean? But we want them to come to school because they enjoy the challenge, the right amount of struggle and support to learn, you know? So I think that's where this, so another pillar, I think the pillars of probably most good schools that, you want kids to struggle and you want them to overcome. And so on the one hand, you have joy. On the other hand, you have scaffolding. Another intense pillar was from the very start was professional development. You cannot expect teachers to teach differently than what they were taught. I mean, unless you are, I would say, intensively, actively, intentionally giving them opportunities to unlearn and relearn different ways of being, and then different ways of like actually like the techniques of teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like otherwise, there's just, you cannot expect humans to just change because because of words. No, like that they have to see it. We have to talk about it. We have to practice it. We have to model it. So we have intense professional development. Now we're really lucky that we have a really strong core of teachers who have themselves transformed and are helping the younger teachers now, kind of like onboarding them to a different way. But at the beginning, it was really, and helping really model that transformation, right? Because you, at least here, what's worked for us is they have to see it. For example, even something as simple as reading a children's book with really awesome expressions, with different voices, and captivating kids' attention and pulling in them into a story. That's a learned behavior, which I think was fairly common in the world that I grew up in, but is not common here. And yet it's one of those fundamentally such a powerful thing is when little kids, especially, but even older kids, when they're read to out loud with human expression, is so powerful. So,
Mm-hmm.
but we have to learn that. We have to learn that. And yeah, so joy, scaffolding, professional development. I would also say that this idea of hybridity is also uh, a core pillar, meaning like we don't want to be part of the pure colonial exercise, right? And yet, we are a mixed place here, right? I mean, the British were in Darjeeling and Kalimpong, the neighboring state, and so and the medium of instruction in Sikkim is English, and so the Western influence on Sikkim has been here for a long time. And in fact, if you read Sikkim's history, influence from various parts have been here. And in that way, I feel like there are similarities to the American story, although a very, very different trajectory. But the idea that we are mixed, and navigating that mixedness, that hybridity, is figuring out what do we want from Western progressive modern education. What can we take from the quote unquote alternative education in Asia, which we have amazing examples of, from Sri Aurobindo to Tagore to, of course, Krishnamurti, and which at the school we are, I would say, not super explicit about, but the framework is there that I think has been there from the beginning, which is that we can learn things from other places, and that is great for us. And we have had amazing educators really from many different places. most recently from Manhattan and from Bangalore and Rhode Island and Providence, Rhode Island. We've had these people who come and influence us. And yes, sometimes they work with the kids, but they really, real thing is with the teachers.
Mm-hmm. Is that what led you, I mean, after building Taktse, building a teaching university?
Yeah, I mean, I think the KBU, the Khangchendzonga Buddhist University, is, I think that it's going to have a major, and the first and major kind of component is around learning and education. And so we're going to start with I think, a master's of educational leadership. And we're going to build on kind of the foundation we have of educators who are really committed to their own transformation and to the transformation of others around them and to learning, you know?
Well, that's what I want to ask you about is like thinking over your life, and it doesn't have to be tied to your role as a educator in any way, but what were some of those really big transformational moments for you? What's the catalyst?
Transformational moments. One of them, I would say, it was learning to sail as a kid. Like, because I imagine it was a mini version of what I later felt like to learn to drive, you know, but it was much younger, right? Like I was like, I don't know, 8 or 10, and you're basically in these little bathtubs with sails on them, you know, like, and there's a kind of a desire to master, you know, to know how to, in that sense, you know, harness the wind, or do you like, how do we do this? I want to do this. And I think intensely formative, I would say transformational, because it's like, I can be, I can do this. And, you know, although my mom is somewhat a sailor, my dad is not. And so suddenly I was in this situation where I was learning to do something that I could get good at that my parents were not, you know, experts at. And so something awesome about that. But and I think it just happened to be with sailing for me, because I think also there's a intense nature component, because, you know, I don't know, ocean is scary also, you know, and so there's an overcoming of a fear or anxiety, and like, but I imagine it's similar to like how I felt when I first rode a bike. I just don't remember it. So I think that was formative. I think the other, you know, the formative stuff is like, there's these little vignettes I remember. I mean, what is formative or transformational? Transformational with a question, right?
Yeah. I mean, particularly on the back of thinking about the transformations you want teachers to go through, and teaching is the art of helping people transform. So that's why I was curious about what you have identified as those big transformational moments in your own life.
I mean, it's funny because like when I think about it and I try to say it in word, when I want to say it in words, it's like, oh, you just like making teachers happy. And I feel like they're linked to transformation, because it's like, you know, this idea, you water grows. And I first went to my high school, and one of the first um interactions I had, again, was studying the Greeks, where we're going to do the Greeks that year. And so we
And
had to read something, and then we had to come in with come in with some, you know, manifestation of what we've read. Like you're supposed to, like, I don't know, write a book report or something like that. And I had made a paper mache mask of like Dionysus or something like that. And I remember the teacher that I would let be a huge influence on me. She was just like, she was so authentically impressed that I had brought this mask. And of course, at that time, I hadn't read the Greek, I didn't know about Greek theater. And I didn't know that the mask was a valuable within the context of the course I was about to take. You know, I had just no idea. Yeah, I just remember her reaction, and I remember, you know that expression, the my Angelou, people don't remember what you say, they don't remember what you do, they remember how you made them feel. And
Mhm.
that's a wisdom I'm grateful uh, to have from uh, Dr. Angelou. because I think that was part of the transformation. It's like there were so many different transformations along the way where there were adults who saw something in me and acknowledged it. It's like, wow, this is awesome. And it was an awesome, like the mask that I made of Dionysus, and it was awesome in a way that like I knew that she meant it, but I didn't really know why, and it only revealed itself later in a sense. You know what I mean? So I feel like in my life I've had so many little transformations like that, which were kind of like, oh, oh, like there's something here. The realization that there's something here. Yeah, I think mostly it's the transformative moments are the accumulation of people giving me positive feedback.
What what's been hardest? Maybe unexpectedly hard, or you anticipated it to be difficult with founding schools, with running schools, living up to so many of these values that you hold?
I think the most challenging part for me is grappling with the extent to which I might think I'm like changing a system, but that I might be actually reinforcing a system.
Mm,
So yeah, I think that's the most challenging because on the kind of micro individual level, like every child deserves an awesome, amazing learning experience childhood and as long as possible, right? And yet the stark disparity between schools exists or school systems exist. I'm really proud of our teachers, and I love the school and the really nurturing environment, and the fact that the teachers are so committed to becoming better, to help the kids become better is just, it's amazing. And it is also hard for me that more kids or all kids don't have access to teachers like that, and other resources, totally. But so I think that one of the challenges has been like, what role am I playing in, on the one hand, making lives better in some way, and in what way am I participating in a perpetuation of class and hierarchy replication, which I think is a question that is probably a normal one for people who work in for humanists who work in private schools.
yeah. What is most energizing, joyful for you of all the work that you do?
Let's see. Two things come to mind. One is I love I love professional development sessions with teachers where the teachers are like, and we have these a bunch, but where they pair share about something that we're talking about, and they're really into it. And I love that. I love that. And it happened. I mean, it happens all the time, but it happened recently when we were doing an analysis of like some feedback that we'd done, and it was so vibrant, the conversations that teachers were having with each other about this text, which was just a bunch of feedback, and they were talking about it, and they were disagreeing, and I love that. I love that. And so I love that when that happens with teachers. I especially love it when it happens with teachers because I feel like it's more likely than to happen with their students. They're more likely to see that like the
Mm,
interaction around grappling with an idea or text is that's it's enlivening. It's so I love that. And and the other thing that comes to mind recently, which I'm so grateful for, is we had our first artist in residence, and he is a theater person. I mean, he's many things, but he's a real theater person. And I have felt guilty for many years that we have not really done theater close to what I have experienced as a kid, which was again really transformative theater where you had these adults leading you through a process where you really felt like you became, in my case, Odysseus or Everyman or Pooh, you know. And I've felt guilty that I haven't been able to bring that, and I saw it recently because Gaurav, our artist in residence, brought it to the local community. He brought it to the local community, and So some of the adults in our community participated, some kids from another school participated, and it was amazing. It was amazing to see. So that energized me. But I mean, that's kind of a recent example of when we had another resource person come, Mr. Daniel, and he introduced us to what was called studio culture. And he's, of course, a master facilitator, but see, again, he did it first with our teachers and then with our kids and teachers. And it was incredible because, yeah, he led us through this very different way of looking at the world. And I suppose there's something there, which is like, being able to really see things that are not evident, to see below the surface of things, which is probably an art, not a science, is incredible. I love it. I love and that's what I think partly why I like the teachers discussing everything. There's an attempt to see deeper, or to parse, to like, and that for me is fundamentally I don't know, the part of the potential human experience is how are we going to understand our lives and ourselves. And so, and I think that's probably why, transformation is exciting, whether it's theater or in the studio culture or whatnot, is like that transformation. Again, the transformation meaning, in a sense, there's a difference. There's a differential. And when you transform, you suddenly, or maybe not so suddenly, you are something that you weren't before. And there's something exciting about, and there's something, like electrons jumping, there's a sense of electricity there. So maybe it's just hedonism. Maybe that's what it comes.
Maybe it's just alchemy.
Yeah. Yeah, but let me plug, there is something really amazing about seeing kids read books that I've read and being able to talk to them about it, them feeling connected to characters that I know well is incredible. So yeah, let's not forget reading, the most important thing beyond the woo-woo, before the woo-woo. We gotta read. We gotta learn to read.
What are the big questions you're grappling with right now? Yourself, what are you parsing out and digging deeper on?
I think one of the major ones is, where are the tensions and overlaps between the tradition that I grew up in, which is, I think, largely a progressive education, John Dewey influenced tradition, and cognitive science ed research on the other hand. So yeah, that's the big questions for me, is like, where are they in sync and where are they dissonant? I think, I mean, and in a way, I feel like I authentically inherit them both, in the sense of like, I definitely grew up in progressive education influenced contexts and have been influenced throughout my journey in that way. And I have also been influenced by science, the scientific method, and this idea that we can know, and we should try to know how things work, especially the black box of the human mind. And thirdly, that we should be humble in all of these endeavors. But I think that's a major thing that I'm interested in exploring, the extent to which what we know now about how the brain works interacts with what we believe, in a sense, the aims of education, the larger, the whole child, the preparing for citizenship, how these interact. That's a big one for me. Another one is how our great teachers, how can we help them be excellent? And does that happen in a course? Can that happen in a course? So far for us, it has really happened with really intense mentorship and apprenticeship. And in fact, a good friend of the school who has come over to Sikkim from an amazing school in the United States, Miss Maria Fahey, when we were talking to her about it, but she said, the stability of her school as a young teacher was paramount to her learning how to teach, because there were teachers who had been there for many years, who had developed their craft, and who she was co-teaching with and doing corrections with, and who she collaborated with. And that to me it connected so well to kind of an Eastern, what I associate with kind of like an Eastern paradigm about that values lineage. Like we don't just spontaneously become something. We are part of a lineage where we inherit or learn from those who come before us. And so anyway, so the broader question is though, so how do great teachers become great teachers? To what extent can we structure that and teach it like reading? And to what extent is it also fundamentally experiential? You have to be in the classroom. You have to have disastrous class after disastrous class. You've got to go talk to someone about it and then celebrate when you have a class that meets your expectation. Like how does that happen? And yeah, so that's the other kind of question.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating. I mean, we know for younger kids to learn, they need models, and exemplars, and those are still useful through college, but perhaps become even more important when like lives are on the line, which is the case for a teacher in a classroom with students where they can have lifelong impacts on them. I think it should be, some of what you described, more like medical school where there's intensive mentorship, apprenticeship, and shadowing, and like really slow scaffolded steps before you let a teacher loose in a classroom on their own. And I've worked at many different school settings, and yeah, the schools that had two teachers in a classroom working together, or just even that kind of element, really boosted their effectiveness and their classroom management. And then their own they were able to regulate because there's another adult in the room to regulate with. And I think that's really crucial. This sounds fascinating. If you put yourself 5 years in the future, what do you hope you're working on?
I mean, I guess essentially the same thing, but maybe potentially at a different scale. I think I've been brainwashed that like what's the most important thing that I could do with my life is probably help as many teachers as possible help kids learn to read, especially in like kindergarten 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5. So learn to read, very much followed by math. It seems so, I don't know. On one hand, it seems so boring. I would in many ways I connect better to high school kids who are grappling with interesting ideas of power, virtue, wealth. Like I like that. I like those discourses and grappling with them. But I can just see, yeah. So I in 5 years I would love to be working to help more teachers be really good at teaching reading to kids who wouldn't otherwise have it. That's especially, like that's to me, I think the biggest system change could be like real literacy levels, which again, I think we need in the United States also. Like we're
Mhm. I think it's 70% of the United States is around at or below the sixth grade reading level. What are you attributing to the benefits of reading?
I think Stanislas
I
I
never say it out loud. I just see it with my eyes. That's reading without speaking.
yeah. So there's something just fundamental that happens with the brain where you're developing a muscle in the brain. And so I think there's this amazing thing that we have as the brain is able to interpret off visuals plus sounds into meaning. And I think in terms of information acquisition, um, that is super super valuable in terms of understanding, like a building block for understanding, so being
Mhm.
able to read and read at increasingly sophisticated levels just gives us access to what I think of as our shared human identity. And by the way, I love audiobooks. I love audiobooks also, but I think our ability to read opens up our potential to be, if that makes
Mhm.
sense. Her ability to read opens up our potential to be.
Well, as you're speaking, I think about, with verbal language, You're limited to where you are in physicality, whereas books can open up worlds, thoughts, ideas, and literal, like, we have to have words to describe things, I think, to be able to have ideas. I think it's very difficult to have an idea we can't put words to. It's not just building a language so you can communicate, it's building a language so you have concepts to understand yourself in the world, and you have to have a name for it. So, yeah, I think books opens that up beyond wherever you are in the world and the conversations you're having. And
yeah, I think it's part of the human skill potential, right?
there are things I've understood later only because I learned language around it, that I wasn't understanding it before I had words for it.
I think that does bring us oddly full circle, because I think my journey of my names has been exactly that. Like, how does one can one like does one become the name one is given, or how do we put words to ourselves?
Well,
So
you do put words to yourself that weren't
yeah,
there before. You've literally have named yourselves.
yeah, and I just think, to the point that you were saying, like, how do we, if so much is about how we understand ourselves and the world, and the language shapes that, and the questions we ask shape it. Our concepts and our framework shape it. And so I hadn't thought about this exactly in this way before, but I do think that the journey of my names is part of that. Is like, okay, well, what word do I use to identify or to express I am?
Mm-hmm. Do you remember when we first met?
I think for the record, I think I have a great memory. Okay. It doesn't encode the same, but tell me, what is your version?
My version is the reality because I have synesthesia, and that played into our meeting. I didn't have that word for 10 more years, so I didn't even know conceptually what was happening. But I love a lot of vowels next to each other. It's a thing. And we had arrived as a freshman class, and they had us line up in a row um, out on that quad area before we like went into any buildings or got shown around the school or whatever. And you were in front of me. We had to turn to a partner and share what our names were, and then be able to tell everyone else what the name was and how to spell it. And you were
Wow.
like, "I'm Peter Pintso Lauenstein Denjongpa." And I was like, so many vowels. Just so many vowels were happening, right?
That's funny.
So yeah, our first meeting was me having to memorize your name, which transformed over time as you went to different places and expanded who you were, and you incorporated those into your names. I love teasing you about it, but I think it's a really powerful thing.
Yeah. Well, it's a journey. It's a journey.
Well, I'm going to put in the show notes the great books that you recommended, and obviously Taktse and KBU. Do you want to shout out any organizations or groups or people doing good work?
There's so many, especially in Sikkim, that are doing some amazing things. But I suppose PLF, SPMF, Kellum Foundation, the Catalytic Charter School Foundation, um, 17,000 Feet Foundation. I mean, foundation, is one of the words that is kind of mandatory for a certain kind of NGO. And even within there's something called the Chief Minister's Charter School, which is a government school, which is really doing. I mean, and I mentioned that the theater up in there actually. Yeah, and I guess the last thing is that if someone, an educator especially, needs a break from the world, get in touch and come visit the Himalayas for a little bit.
That's very nice.
Yeah.
Good time to plug that. All right. Thank you for chatting with me today.
Awesome. Awesome to talk.
If you've enjoyed today's discussion, I invite you to share this episode and subscribe to Able Pathways podcast on your favorite platform. Your support helps us to share these meaningful conversations with more people. Visit ablepathways.com or check out the detailed show notes for links to resources and organizations mentioned in today's episode. Have thoughts about this episode or suggestions for future guests? We would love to hear from you. Leave us a comment or email us at hello@ablepathways.com. Until next time, I'm Annabelle, reminding you that there are infinite pathways to growth. May you travel yours with curiosity and courage.